Welcome back to another episode of the Sky Society podcast. I am back today chatting with Aaliyah Fowler. She is the Quantum Community Event Manager at IBM. Welcome, Aaliyah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm super excited to jump into your career journey. I feel like Quantum Community Event Manager is something that no one ever thinks is actually a job. When you tell people that's your job, what is their reaction? Or if you say that you...
I think that they kind of tune out at Quantum, to be really honest. But I try to let them know that that's not exactly my expertise either. It's the latter part, the event manager part, creating those experiences.
Yeah, definitely is an interesting one. And one of my favorite things of the podcast is just getting to hear everyone's titles, because they're always so different than what you think is an option for your career when you're just starting out.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, like you said, my name's Aaliyah Fowler. I live in Brooklyn, New York, but I am a California girl at heart, and I'm from Oakland and Sacramento. Currently, I am working at IBM. So Quantum is a very special division, and quantum in general is just a newer concept, and it's not as established as classic computers. And so we are basically building a community around research for quantum, around just community, and really developing this hardware. So developing this hardware and different ways to use it in applications. So I'm cultivating spaces for super smart and curious people to get together.
That's, I feel like, a perfect way to put that. Can you very briefly describe what is quantum, or like what does that field entail?
So quantum computing, it is a huge computer that can process ginormous data sets. And it is measured in qubits as opposed to a classic computer that's just measured in bits. So it's a entirely different system that is basically going to be able to solve the world's problems, but it is still in its infancy. So the spaces that I curate, it varies, but it gets together professionals or even students to work on the software that will run this computer, work on the applications that will actually process these data sets and provide answers for our clients and things like that. So being on the community side, there's a little more wiggle room in terms of we just want to get people involved, and we want people to major in quantum and know that quantum is a thing at all. So we get to have some fun with that.
That is fun. I know that the only times I've really heard of quantum computing is in like movies. Those are always like the computers that like hold the key that's on like gonna save or destroy the world. Like I feel like yes, I think we've all like heard of it in that sense.
Yes. The like most recent time that I've heard it was in Wakanda Forever. And I was like, they're talking about quantum, but it's always in a way that doesn't make actual sense. But it's always going to save the world, which is awesome. And I think that's the one thing that makes me most excited, because it just sounds like the future. And like tech was never on my mind. Like I'm not a STEM girl. I think we all have, our gifts and interests, and that wasn't one of mine. So it's every day, it's like something new. It's a new language.
Well, I'm excited to figure out how you ended up in this space, because it is a very, very unique one. So I want to go back, because you have a really clear like passion for sports, and it's really prevalent throughout your career journey. You have a master's in sports management. So we're going to kind of jump around, because you've had just a myriad of roles. It's a little insane, but also really cool to see, I feel like, how your passions have changed and how you've followed that. So if you want to take us back a couple years ago to you doing your Junior Giants ambassador program for the San Francisco Giants. And can you just tell us a little bit about like why you have this passion for sports?
Yeah, wow, you took it back.
Back.
So,
We're going
yes,
way back.
yeah, so sport was something in undergrad that I latched onto. Personally, I am a 6 foot female. I identify as she, her. And sport has always, even if I was running away from it, it was chasing me. And it's the first thing people bring up. But in college, I didn't play. I played all throughout, like when I was a child in high
What
school.
sports?
Say
Like
it again.
what sports did you play?
Oh, I played volleyball, basketball. I did track and field. Um, that was, yeah, and that was about it. Oh, I was a big cheerleader, like middle school, and like did a bit of
Oh,
competitive cheerleading, and it was so funny. Like I remember when our like cheerleading coach took us to see Bring It On in the theaters. Like that is in my
oh my
heart. Yeah.
gosh.
I'll never forget that. But I was kind of all over the place. Volleyball was my favorite, but I didn't have a passion for it in terms of just buckling down in high school and trying to, ride that into college. I know there's tons of opportunity that way. But it just wasn't something I was super passionate about. So when I got to college, and I went to UC Santa Cruz, which is just, it's a hippie, beautiful, woodsy school in this beach town, and sports are not at the top of their list. Um, but there was a class that I took while I was getting my sociology degree, and it was called Sport and Society. And it really just sparked something in me. It made me think of, all the times where I created relationships or felt encouraged, through sports. And it had me think about how society attaches itself to sport, and fans, they have an ownership kind of like mentality over their favorite football teams. And my entire family, they're like wild Cowboy fans. Um, and the fact that they attach themselves to this team, and we are not from, at least immediately, we're not from Texas. It just made me think like the huge impact sport really does have on our society. And that's from, when you're a kid playing soccer, or, when you're idolizing like a professional team. And so I was like, okay, so I could do this. I could, you know, engage with something I enjoy, but it doesn't have to be what it has been. It doesn't have to be, this physical piece. And so after getting out of school, it was just very natural to me in my mind, being the first to, go to school, to graduate, and then now let's pursue a master's, because I'm not sure how I'm going to pursue this job in sport. And my whole thought was just bridging sport and community. Like I knew how much sport had done for me in terms of those relationships I spoke about, and how I felt about myself. And so I wanted to do that, and I just needed a little help. So that's where the University of San Francisco and my master's in sport management came from.
I love the way that you talk about sports. And I think it's in a very, I can see the way that you approach it is from that like psychological perspective of it does have, if you actually think about it, like a monumental impact on our society. And like, I mean, football in America is the like quintessential example of that, of,
Right.
that a game that you seemingly have no connection to can bring people to tears, right? Like it's absolutely insane, or how big fantasy football has become, and
Yeah.
just the pride and association that people will place with these teams is really insane when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, just coming off of the World Cup and the U.S.,
Yes.
we were kind of kicked out of that, but it has taken over the world, and so
Yeah.
it's garnered all these eyes just on the strength of a passion or, people identifying, with these different teams.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I was in Sayulita, Mexico for the past week, and the World Cup was going on, and every single day they were playing it in like the cafe where I would go and work. And it was really cool to see. So because the place I was at a co-working hostel, and there's people from all over the world. And like when they like you could go and like to any game, regardless if it was like US or not, and you would see like just how passionate those countries like were watching their team. And like we're in Mexico, so like we're not in anyone's country, but it was just so cool. I remember when like France was playing and all the French people came out to watch, and just like every single time there's a goal, it's like even like the employees aren't even like they're serving us, but they're like not really paying attention. They're so invested in the game. It was really cool to see it from that perspective.
That's awesome.
So you have this passion, that sports had a big influence in your life and community, and you want to kind of merge those two together. So you go and you get this master's degree, then what?
So while I was getting the master's degree, that's where the San Francisco Giants came in. And initially, it started as the ambassador program that they have. And I was over a YMCA in Sacramento, their like youth baseball team. Did I say basketball?
I don't know.
We're talking about the San Francisco Giants. And so this was an arm from their community relations department. And from there, I ended up getting an internship in-house. So what was AT&T Park at the time, I got the role of their community relations intern, and that was in 2014. And it was so fun. It was such a good time. Largely because we ended up winning the World Series that year, which was insane. But the connection that the San Francisco Giants had and have to the community, and the way that they prioritize their fans. And at the time, it was very important for all of the players to prioritize just connecting with fans or doing different philanthropic work and offering their time. It was such a great organization to be a part of. And so it was really just internships during that time that kind of cultivated this idea I had of bringing the community into this like sporting experience, and how you could use sport to, educate or inspire. And it was the perfect organization to do that with at the time, because that was such a priority for them. And so I had that internship. It went its course, like the most wild course ever. It was so fun. And then at the end of that, because it's such a great organization, there were no positions open. And so it was just kind of like my time to go. And it's like, I had, created great relationships. And I actually just recently just grabbed lunch with an old boss of mine from there, but it was just time to go. And so at that time too, I was then graduating from the program that I was in, and had started to work for a nonprofit. So retired 49ers football player had started a great organization. It was very small. And I started to work with them in terms of a bit of marketing, and also just different, again, like philanthropic work that they had. I remember putting together just different like food baskets and things like that for the community. And it was during that time that I had connected with a friend of mine I knew from high school. And she was in New York going to Columbia for her master's degree. And she had came back home, finished up her degree, and she let me know that she actually wanted to go back to New York. And so at this time, I need to start looking for a full-time job and just pursue my dreams or what I was envisioning at the time. And so it was like, I could go too. And, looking back, that is insane. But I'm so glad that like I went with my gut um, and headed out this way.
Wow. Okay. So you decided to leave California then?
I did. I did. So
Wow.
yeah, I was working in an internship. They let me know that it wasn't going to grow. And so that was
Okay.
another factor in me being like, okay, well, let's try something new.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And then you moved to New York. Amazing. That is like was it because I feel like I'm also originally from California, and I recently moved to Austin, but I was between Austin and New York. And there's just this like magic about New York that I feel like draws people to it. Was the magic real when you got there?
When I got here, I would say yes and no. So, no, in the fact that I moved into a great apartment uptown. So, in Washington Heights, if anyone's familiar, just to give you a reference point, like, so Times Square is on 42nd Street. I lived on 190th. So I was like very far removed
Yeah,
from
okay. I thought you were
what's
about to
on
say
television.
you were going to be like the street over. I was going to be like, wow, but no.
No. So that's like the no part. Like this is a part that it's nearly the Bronx, and it's not. This part is not on television. It's filled with culture, and if that's where you want to be, you definitely should be there. But it wasn't exactly some type of fairy tale. I also came to New York with no job, and I had a few contacts that I had met while working for the San Francisco Giants, and some people who had actually finished my program. They were alumni of my master's program, that I had been in contact with and had set up meetings with, and so I felt like I had did my due diligence, but I really was coming over to New York with nothing. So that's probably like the craziest kind of part about it. But I think that's kind of like the wonder of it too, just being younger, and it's such a fluid time in our lives. And I don't think a lot of people really take that to heart, or you feel like you need to be in a certain place so soon. And it's okay, if you take a chance on something, because it's like you'll get a little older, and maybe you'll start to have responsibilities, or other things going on that require you to not be as fluid. So
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about it a lot of times on the podcast, but like I moved to Austin not knowing anyone, and I've talked to other guests too. And for situations like yours, where if you have an opportunity to go try something new, especially when you're young and you don't have, ties to a specific place, even though it may feel like you have emotional ties, you really,
right.
really don't. And you could always go back. Like you can always go back. I feel like we don't often think about that. Like it's just, you can go back, you can change your mind. Like it's okay. And I think it's absolutely worth the risk, because if you don't like New York, you could do it for a year, say it's not for you, but then at least know that you've tried it.
I've heard you say that too, and I really identified, because California is my heart. I can go back at any point. So many people that I love are there. But those that love you back, they'll be there, and they want you to
Yeah.
grow. And so
Yeah.
10 out of 10, I highly recommend. It's not easy, but
No.
I do recommend it. It's definitely not going to be the easiest path, but you'll grow so much from it. And because I know I definitely have.
Yeah. And I think when you go to a new place, you also get to become a new version, and a new version in the sense where you don't have anyone's opinions of you that you need to kind of like live up to, right? Like when you,
Yeah.
like before I was in San Diego, because I was there for school, and, people expected things and knew me as someone. And then when I moved to Austin, and now like you can almost like reinvent yourself or start again more genuinely like as who you are, and kind of shed like maybe those other qualities that, you know, you don't want to bring with you into this next stage in your life.
I completely agree. I agree. It definitely gives you space to just try new things in so many different ways. Whether that is, who you want to be, or, some things you would like to, try on, or, without judgment,
Yeah.
and without having to feel obligated to stay exactly who you were. And like I said, those times when you are younger, and I was in my 20s, and it's a flexible time where you should, whether you stay in the same place or not, you really should be allowed to change and to grow. And but moving across country does help you do that.
It does. They always say the best way to change your habit is to change a habit is to change your environment. And so moving across the country is like the most extreme version of that.
Yes, and
Um,
not necessary, but it's a great way to get a fresh start, for
It
sure.
is. And I mean, now I think me being here 2 years later, and I mean, you've been in New York for a while, I'm sure you feel it the same way, is like, then I look back and I'm like, I built a whole life here. Like I built a whole damn life where one did not exist for me before. New friends, new apartment, you know, new habits, like everything. And that feels very, very rewarding. And knowing how hard it was, and now looking back and being like, I did that. Like it does feel good.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. You could, pat yourself on the back, like you've come far. And I know neither of us are, where we even plan to be, or we know, this
Yeah.
isn't the end or anything like that. But you've come a ways. Like, it's not something everyone does.
No. No. And most people think it's crazy, but but here we are telling everyone else to do it. So be crazy with us. Okay,
Yeah.
but so
Okay.
tell me now. We'll go back to kind of your journey here. So you ended up getting a job at Lululemon and you were there for almost 3 years. So tell me about, and you were an educator. So you were someone in the store selling product, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, like I said, I came out here with just some contacts, and unfortunately, none of that really panned out. And so, while I was still, looking and knowing I wanted to be in sport, I started working at Lululemon. In that first year, I was an educator, and so that's basically a sales associate. I was working on the Upper East Side, which was another type of like culture shock. It's a very affluent area, and it was a great way to explore the city. At the time, they were basically paying us to work out. And so, me and a good friend of mine that I made at the store, we basically would travel around. And I don't want to say travel like it's far, but we would explore New York and try all these different type of like boutique workout places. Um, and it was a great way for me to kind of just explore, first getting here.
That was part of your
And
job, was to go and try out the places?
yes, so
No
they
way.
yes, there was a time where they actually gave us Visa cards, so they would be reloaded every month. Because at first we were getting reimbursed, but then they gave us these Visa cards, and they worked at like workout places. It was a very specific card, and so they basically paid us. And so I'm sure it was they wanted their product in those boutique studios. And I'm not sure if this was the case at every other Lululemon in the country, but it was a cool opportunity, and
Yeah.
it was a cool job. Um, and then I continued to look for jobs, and it was like just sending my resume into a black hole here. Like, it's just, you would hear nothing back, and you would kind of just keep looking for things, and I would cold email, and I would cold call, and I would do all types of things, but you also need to support yourself. And so I think I reached 1 year as an educator, and then I became a key leader at another store. So I got into management. basically. And started doing that. I was able to get a little more involved and work on like the community outreach piece that Lululemon's really great about. Um, and there was even a program called Here to Be where, you know, I was able to have like some grant money and award that to this really great yoga organization that was um, like teaching children like yoga and meditation and helping them, you know, just overcome trauma and things like that. So it shifted a little more to back to the community piece that I was so drawn to with sport. But the time there was really challenging. I spent it, like I mentioned earlier, I spent it really wanting to be elsewhere. And so um, looking back, it was an opportunity for me to be present, and I could have executed that a lot better in terms of bettering myself where I was instead of just constantly, you know, trying to be elsewhere or,
Yeah.
you know, thinking that I was supposed to be, and those are air quotes, I was supposed to be elsewhere. Um, when it was a good opportunity, uh, and I could have used it in different ways.
Tell me about that more, because I know that's something that you're really passionate about now is being present, and that has helped you get to where you are in your career. So what were you doing that wasn't like why were you not present there? How did that look different than what it looks like now with you being present with who you are and where you are in your career?
I think that it included a balance. I think it includes much more of a balance now in terms of what it looks like, you know, me being present. At the time, it was just, it's a retail job, and anyone who has worked a retail job, you know, that it can drag. It could definitely drag. And, um, you know, some of the parts they're just not going to be great. I think that in that space, if I were to go back, I think I would use the time to become yoga certified or use the time to really invest in my relationship and my practice with yoga. Um, I'd, you know, I'd use that time to possibly cultivate other, you know, ways for us to connect with the community. Um, but it felt like at the time too that I was surviving, and that I knew that that wasn't the, you know, final step for me here in New York. You know, it was very early on at that time. Um, and so I think it would have just included me um, practicing more gratitude in those moments.
I ask because I think that there's a lot of people where you were at Lululemon. I think there's a lot of people that have a job because they have to pay the bills, but that's not actually where they want to be. And it's really hard to get out of that, especially once you have a steady income and you have security and you have something that feels a little bit safe. Even though it's not what you want to do, I think it's hard sometimes to be present and acknowledge that it's not where you want to be, right? I think maybe it's easier to kind of like push that feeling behind. And so, yeah, I think it's good to hear that, because I think a lot of people are kind of where you were then.
I agree with that. And if I had any type of advice, it would be to be present in those moments. And that doesn't mean, you know, forget about your goals or, you know, don't use your spare time to, you know, pursue things that you actually want to do. I think it would be really just taking a breath and practicing gratitude for what you do have. And I think when you're coming from a place of lack, that's the energy that you're going to get back. So I think the gratitude kind of shifts that mindset to abundance, and that the gratitude creates space. So it's basically, the glass is it's half full, not half empty, and it's much easier said than done. But I really do think like life is just it's really a game of energy, and you putting out positivity and just grateful for the small things that you do have. I think that the next step is going to come even sooner.
Yeah, I think that the being present thing is so important. I think being present because even now, it like practicing it always, because when you're someone who is goal oriented, right? Like there's some place you always want to be. I'm sure you are happy at your job, but I'm sure there's somewhere else you want to go next, and there's somewhere you want to go next. And when we're thinking about the future all the time and we're so focused on where we want to go, then we're missing out on so much that's happening right now in the present. And this is like a huge shift that I've made for myself too, as someone who's like building my own business. There's always things I'm like, that could be done better and where I want to go. And I'm so excited to be there all of the time. And that it like constantly takes me like, I have to very consciously be aware and force myself and like sit down and be grateful for what I have, because it's so great. And if I keep focusing on the future, then I'm missing out on what I have done for myself, which we talked about, is build this awesome life for myself in Austin. And there's this really awesome book. I'm sure maybe you've read it, The Power of Now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. It's making me think of that book, which is such a great book on being present if you need practice with that.
100%. 100%. It's a hard like lesson to learn. And I think you really reflect on it, when you are in those hard situations, you're able to make it out. And so it might be kind of like a hindsight thing, but once you do learn that lesson, to hold on to it, it's such a practice. And I love when people say, like yoga is a practice, or, this and that is a practice, because it's something that you work out every day. Like you said, we're not going to stop being, goal oriented people. That's not a negative thing. But we do have to kind of like look around, honor where we've been and how far we've come, and it's okay to know that there's a ways to go, but that gratitude goes such a long way.
It does. It really does. And I think giving yourself permission to feel that gratitude, even when things aren't perfect, is really important. Even when life isn't exactly where you want to be, you still deserve to feel that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wish I had your voice in my life. Because that's such a good point. It really is, just to give yourself permission. I had gotten my master's degree, and, I had done, these things that I hadn't saw anyone else do. And so I'm thinking that I had to be in a certain place, or, I needed to see fruits of my labor. And me moving across country and starting a new life, somehow at that time it wasn't enough. And now looking back, it was a big deal. And I think we should go a little easier on ourselves, for sure.
Yes. And I can say that now, no, because I have not been there. Now I have to remind myself that I deserve it, even when things aren't exactly the way I think they need to be. Because when you like delay that feeling, then you're just going to be so unhappy and miserable. And yeah, we all deserve some gratitude, some permission. I use that word a lot now. It's like, you got it. No one else is going to give you permission, so you got to give it to yourself.
Yeah.
And you did end up, your time at Lululemon did not last forever. So you went over to Tough Mudder. So tell me about that transition.
Yeah, so it was a pretty smooth transition. So I kept applying. And this really, was something that just hit in a way. And so I didn't know anyone. I applied online. I'll never forget, hitting submit, and then someone reached out to me, and, I had a few interviews and ended up getting the job. And Tough Mudder, if you haven't heard about it, the company I worked for was an obstacle course racing company. And in terms of sport, it wasn't exactly what I saw for myself, but it was such an opportunity. And um, as I said, I was, diligently looking for something else. So I was ecstatic to, have this new chapter in my life. And so I started there as an as an event coordinator. Um, and it was such an interesting place. And I didn't know much about OCR at all, but it was a space where I learned so much about event logistics and operations and what it took to create experiences for anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 people. We also traveled and built these events in very rural areas. So it was an adventure, like every different market that we were in. And after my first year there, I became an associate producer. We created this concept of the festival. So we have this huge race that's happening, and we basically created a party for them to come to after they're done with the race. Following registration, we created an area for our partners and sponsorships, and also children. And so we were able to take that festival concept to all of the markets that we were going to that second year too. And so it was a great opportunity to just kind of build onto my skills, also diversify what I meant in my mind in terms of just like sport, also in community as well. With such a niche product, you really create a cult following, and Tough Mudder people were devoted to this really wild event. And so it was very interesting. I grew a lot, but I was also burnt out for the very first time in my life, and I didn't know exactly what that was. Um, so that was a very interesting that was an interesting just experience altogether. So by the end of that second year, that's when I was having the feelings of just having nothing left, really. And if it was at that time where I kind of wanted to possibly look into other things, but it's just you don't have even the capacity to really do so. We were traveling so much, and we're going to markets multiple times. It was a lot. And at the end of the second year, I actually ended up being laid off, and this was at the top of 2020.
In 2020, this is COVID. We're getting into COVID season.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's
okay.
not, we weren't laid off because of COVID, though. So
But it was just
this was
rough.
actually in January, excuse me, it was actually February. They let us, so let me backtrack. In December, we finished our year, we finished our season, and we are all about to go to our holiday party, and we ended up having like an all hands meeting for the company, and they let us know that they were soon going to run out of payroll. And this is December 2000.
This is at the like you're about to go to the holiday party and they're telling you this.
We're still in the office. I don't think we had changed our clothes yet. So after this was when we were all going to head to the Christmas party. And so they're saying, cooler heads will prevail. It'll totally be fine. But we want to let you guys know. So basically in the new year, we wouldn't be coming into the office until they tell us that we can. And so January, we were just in limbo, waiting for a contract to go through. waiting for, you know, us to basically, you know, be saved in a way. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And so early February, we were all kind of brought in and they let us know that we had been laid off. And so this is early February 2020, before, you know, anything has, you know, broke. We really don't know what's happening just yet. And so while I was feeling burnt out the year prior, I randomly was in an Apple store and like told a woman, like, I was kind of delusional too, but I was like, hey, do you guys do seasonal roles? I don't know where my mind was because I had no time for that. I guess I just really wanted to be elsewhere. But she was like, hey, you seem so nice. So she gave me her email. And then, so at this time now, when I'm in limbo, you know, just a few months later, I reached out to her and I actually ended up getting a job at Apple like that April. So I ended up losing my job and I get a job in the Genius Bar, by the grace of God, like the universe at the time.
So this is like, you are a technical specialist. You are one of those people that we go into and like ask for help. Like
Yes.
how, I mean, there's no history of tech in your background. So where did
There's none at all. There's none at all. And I mean, this is just a testament to like being open and malleable. And honestly, customer service is at the root of every single thing that I've done. Being able to speak to people, being able to um, empathize and give people the space to let you know, what it is that they need or how to best help them. That is at the root of every job that I've had, even if my like career hasn't been linear. I've always been able to lean on those skills. And so in this space, it was no different. Um, Being in the Genius Bar in Brooklyn, New York, it was very interesting, but I loved it so much because the space that I was in was filled with creatives. So all of my coworkers were these just super interesting, cool people of New York City. And they also came from, you know, all over the place if they're not, you know, directly from Brooklyn. And so it was more so about the experience with my team members that I took so much from. And this is also after me being burnt out in a job that I fought so hard for, and had such a leeway up to. So something I was waiting to create this career in sport. And it turned out to just burn me out and lay me off. And so now I'm working at an Apple store, back in retail, but it is fancy retail. If you know, you know. And so it was a time for me to really reflect on what it is that I want and what what can I get from this experience? I know that I don't want to be at Apple for forever. And so it was such a chance for me to be present. And it was when I realized I hadn't been present these past however many years. So this was like the entire world kind of shut down. I now have a part-time job at an Apple store. And so it was just like, okay, what is it that I want? And how am I going to use my time here to better myself and to, you know, set myself up as best as possible for whatever is next after this.
And so now, like a Lululemon, you were in retail, we're not being present. Here,
Yeah.
Apple, big, more present, and you started doing some freelancing. Is that correct?
I did. Yes. So one of our VPs at Tough Mudder, he ended up going into partnership and creating uh, an event company. And so this event company they would have their own events, but they also were contracted by others to staff their events or to staff their like marketing campaigns or their experiential activations. And so they reached out to me, which was great. And so I was able to continue with my part-time job and then also grow my event skills through that. And so I was just open and like and willing to kind of split my time and run all over the city and things like that. um and I'm super grateful for that time.
Amazing. Wow. So yeah, so then you did some freelance while you're working at Apple. And so now I'm saying, so that I feel like that Apple, that was like the step in tech that you needed then to go and get this role at IBM.
I don't think it hurt at all. Definitely didn't hurt at all. But I really attribute just Apple giving me the space to try other things while I was there. And so it's during this time that I'm able to dive deeper into photography, and I'm able to, do these different freelancing, which ranged from the experiential activations to the 5 borough bike tour that had 32,000 participants on this bike ride, and me being the start manager, managing the start shoot. And I don't think the entire month kind of leading up to that event specifically, I worked at Apple at all. So Apple really gave me the space to kind of explore, and it was such a wonderful kind of stepping stone, or just like in between job that really encouraged me. When it came to coming to IBM, I was actually referred by an old colleague of mine. So we worked at Tough Mudder together. And prior to the layoff, this colleague had already left. And so we had built that relationship during that experience. And in the time, she really acknowledged how much I had grown and how I had used that time in between to work on myself and to really push forward in my career, even though it was such a time of uncertainty and displacement for myself and a lot of our, old coworkers in the world, actually. But it was really affirming to have this be a previous relationship that referred me to this role. And so I don't think Apple hurt in terms of the tech, but it's not related.
Not related.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, now looking back on this, like what a very, very interesting and inspiring journey that you've gone through to get to where you are now. And I'm sure this is just the beginning of the things that you're going to do and the things you're going to accomplish. But I love this theme of being present and viewing these like shifts and changes as opportunities to like learn and grow and invest time doing what you're passionate about, even when that may not be the thing you're getting paid for at the time. And so I really do love that from your journey. And as we wrap up here, unfortunately, even though I want to keep talking, do you have any other advice for women in marketing that you can pass on?
I think my advice would be, of course, be present, but just make sure you have a balance and know that your worth does not solely lie in a role or a company. Know that you're so much more than that, and you deserve whatever hobby you're interested in, whatever extracurricular activity. Those are just as important as your career. And you can be passionate about your career, but make sure you also have things that are just for you and things that, fill your cup other than, what might be on the professional side. balance is really important, and you deserve all sides of that.
That is beautiful. Well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun chatting with you and going through your career journey. I feel like I've learned so much and been inspired along the way. So thank you, Aaliyah. And where can our audience find you if they want to learn more about you?
Sure. You could find me on LinkedIn, and that is just my first and last name. I am on Instagram at Lay, Lay Fowler. And I also have a photography page, and it's Lay Shoots 2.
Beautiful. Well, again, thank you so much, Aaliyah, for coming on the Sky Society podcast.
Thanks for having me.